p.m. at the K-Fug Studio, located at 577 Elk Valley Road. Our host is Wes Nunn, and our guest today is Del Norte County Supervisor Roger Gitlin. And we are joined also by Jamie Yarbrough today. The reason I do this show is that I'm against socialism and the hugely damaging drug culture. I want to invite anyone who would like to join our discussion about these topics to call me, Joan Miles, 464-2729, to arrange to come on the show. To begin with, I believe all of us are humans. All of us humans are mind, body, and spirit, unless you believe in the nihilism or postmodernism that's being taught in the colleges and universities. But with the homeless problem and the welfare system, are we all losing or ignoring our minds? Why can't we solve this and other problems intelligently? As a retired teacher, I would like to give the listeners some homework. Please watch the video on YouTube of Mark Levin interviewing George Gilder on Life, Liberty, and Levin, October 14th. In the book Life After Google, Gilder, who is a peerless visionary of technology and culture, says machine intelligence will always be subject to human intelligence because human intelligence is creative and machine intelligence isn't. But we are always looking for something outside of ourselves to solve our problems when we should look to our own intelligent, creative minds, not to mention the fact that instead of loving learning and knowledge and life itself, all of us know people who throw away these gifts and are consumed by the drug culture. We will talk further in a later show about the George Gilder interview on YouTube that I mentioned today. Let's hear from Roger Gitlin about his town hall on the homeless problem and whatever else he would like to talk about it. Wes, do you have some questions for Roger?
I do. I'd like to talk about a little bit about the airport loan if we have time at the end. But let's start with homeless, the homeless issue. First of all, thank you for that town hall meeting. That was wonderful.
My pleasure.
A lot of
we'll
people.
Do it again.
Yes, good.
Not the first of many.
Do you have any?
Well, I want to say I also am anti-socialism, so before Joan leaves, and I am also strongly against the growing drug culture that's already omnipresent and getting worse. Now, am I needing to speak up a little bit? Okay. I have a problem with that. Sometimes my microphone doesn't work. Anyway, so let's talk about the town hall. First of all, I want to thank everybody who came and those who called me afterward to say they wanted to come, but of course life's emergencies get in the way, and we would have liked to have seen more people there. And we invited all parties, not just people who agree with me or who disagree with me. We had all people, and I made a point of inviting Mike Thornton from True North to sit on the panel because it's important to have his point of view heard, and respected, and understood. This was a town hall to discuss the impact of the 9th District Court of Appeals ruling, which decriminalizes systemic homelessness. They call it a status. We all need rest. We all need sleep. And it is not a crime to be sleeping or resting in an area such as public property. Somehow during the course of the meeting, the subject was changed, not about allowing someone to rest or sleep, but just giving them the collateral behavior. I should say it was steered away from the collateral behaviors as a result of someone being homeless. And I don't want to generalize and say everyone is in this category, but the homeless community is made up of essentially 5 different groups of people. That's pretty clear. Those who are afflicted with mental illness, those who are drug addicted, those who are alcohol addicted, those who've just fallen through the cracks of life, very small percentage I might add, and criminals. Now, when you're talking to these folks, 3 of which the group I just mentioned do not have free will. They cannot make a decision in their best interest because of their vices. And someone said to me that mental illness is not a vice, and that's absolutely correct. But they are prisoners of their behavior. So we have to find where these folks can go so they can enjoy the dignity of life, not be subjected to living in abominable, squalid conditions, which is what is going on right now, and be given help. And that was what this is all about. This meeting Wednesday night is making sure people behave themselves and conduct themselves in a lawful manner and in a social manner, not an antisocial manner. And I said this a couple of times, freedom to throw my fist in the air around and around, that is my right to do so. But it ends, Wes, when your nose begins. So I reminded folks that perhaps the 9th District Court of Appeals ruling was being misinterpreted. So I brought along an erudite attorney, Bill Gray, who is a resident of our area, in the city, and he articulately explained the difference between status and conduct, and I think that set the tone for the meeting. Now, what happened as a result? Everyone had an opportunity to speak. About 200 were there, and I thank Paul Kritz for recording many of it, because some of the people who were on the panel, one city councilor didn't bother to speak at all. But she was very free and open with her words after the meeting to Paul Kritz, where she said, why do we need these town halls? We're taking care of this. It's very kind of embarrassing. It was Mayor Pro Tem Keim, and she didn't say not nary a word, but she was free to criticize the town hall. Well, let me tell you folks, a town hall is an open, robust public display. Everyone should have an opportunity to speak, and their opinions should be respected and heard. To not have a town hall and to wait for someone, such as the city, to tell us what's going on, which may or may not happen, I frankly think the town hall was a prompt to City Manager Weir and the City Council that they need to be disclosing what's going on, not we're taking care of it. That's not good enough for me. I'm a city resident. And it disturbs me when you have that kind of mentality that government knows best for you. Folks, we are the government, you and I. You may not realize that, but you are the bosses, not the people you elect. And to not fully comprehend and understand that means you're kept in the dark. So I know I'm going on, and I'll probably prompt a few other questions, but I felt the first meeting we had, which we'll do a follow-up hopefully in April, was productive and open and robust, and I think and hope we'll move to a solution so that this community can deal with some of the collateral issues on behavior. And I'll turn it over to you.
Well, you know, a couple of things that really stood out to me at the town hall were, one was I really appreciated Bill Gray's interpretation. What I'm getting from that, and see if you agree, the only thing, I mean, it's not giving them, the homeless, a privilege. It's simply decriminalizing what was formerly criminal, which was simply being the status of homeless was criminal, and now it's absolutely not. Is that about right? Does that sum up?
It does sound right. And he brought that up, the difference between status and conduct. Now, who could support or defend public urination, public defecation? Who could support public inebriation, open and wanton drug use? Who could support unleashed dogs running about? Perhaps vaccinated, probably not. Who could support this yelling out of profanity when people, normal people like myself and my wife, walk by there and hear the F-bomb used in decibels louder than what I'm speaking right now? Who could support that kind of conduct? Who could support the trash that's accumulated in 9 weeks on this one little area near the wastewater treatment plant inside of the beautiful, iconic lighthouse. 4 truckloads of trash were removed. Who could support the behavior, not the status of, I need a place to sleep for the night, and this is now 9 weeks later. Who could support that? And those people, I don't think I heard anyone who thought that was acceptable. There was one person who said, you can't criminalize conduct. Yes, you can. That's why we have laws. I can't go on the 101 freeway and drive 100 miles an hour and not expect to be pulled over and punished for my misdeeds. We all can't do that. We can't just do something because remember that freedom to throw your fist ends where my nose begins? But, and she admitted, this lady, well, I carry a knife when I go through this area. Well, who wants that? Who wants elderly being subjected to catcalls and don't feel safe walking through this area, and then the chief says, well, you can make a citizen's arrest, and we have to respond. Who could support that kind of mentality to ask a frail 80-year-old woman to confront one of these individuals who's not acting right? That's the job of our police department. And Wes, we are not talking about sleeping and resting now. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Could I ask, Bill Gray said at the town hall, cities and counties could craft ordinances that state where and for how long a homeless person should sleep overnight. And I assume that means where they cannot sleep overnight. And that's regardless of where else they might go. It's it sounds to me like you could make the Front Street Park off limits.
Well, let me respond. First of all, he also said that you can register folks who need to come in, like you're going to a motel. You can register, and the police can come by and say, "Who are you?" and what do you need? I need to rest. What is your name? What is your contact phone number? So we know who's there. The cities and the counties and the governances that operate have the right to ask that. Yet it's not being done. So the ordinance could very well include who are you and what are your plans here. There's
or it could be done separately, just this is off limits.
Well, okay. Someone approached me the other day and said, you know what, the schools have a lot of property, vacant schools. We have a couple of them in town. Public property, that's public property schools. Why not take over, put a school that's not being utilized or a building that's not being utilized and let the people there? Now, of course, on its face value, when you have children and homeless, immediately the hair on the back of your neck goes to go up. Boy, we can't do that. That's silly. You don't want to subject children to this. So public property is exactly that, Joan, public property. And public property is the park. Public property is schools. Public property is anything that which is not private property. So I don't know what you can or cannot make off limits, but certainly the placement of these tents for more than one night, and I have to underscore that because you remember, you're going there to sleep and rest. The implication is you'll pick up your tent and you'll be gone the next day. Now, if you're not doing that, you're there day after week after month, now we're on our 9th week or 2 months, then that's not what the 9th District ruling says. You can't make residency there. So I'm not an expert, I'm not an attorney on this. I don't know what is deemed appropriate in terms of public property. I do know we have options that are being developed as we speak. Our Daily Bread Ministries, I'm sure you've spoken to them, they're making arrangements, and they'll have up to 60 beds, 30 bunk beds, and meals, hot meals, and place to shower, and offer these folks a dignity of life.
Well, let me ask a few questions, if I may. Do you happen to know, is there any type of current ordinance for the beach or for the Front Street Park that, can anyone camp there any old time?
Well, we have ordinance that says no camping.
Okay.
It's already existing there. Now, Is it being enforced, I think is your question. People say we need to change these laws. And I'm looking at you as I'm saying this, Joan. We have to enforce laws too. Having a law and not enforcing it is like not having a law.
Thank you.
Okay, you're going to have a law and then we're going to ignore it.
Yeah.
Then it's not a law or an ordinance. It's just a piece of paper. Our Board of Supervisors signed a piece of paper that says we're going to eliminate systemic homelessness. 5-0 vote, I voted for it. Homelessness in Del Norte County. What do you think they're doing about that? Just words, folks. Just words. They sure sound good. And Dr. Caldwell and Mike Tompkins and several other people, and Mike Thornton were there. And I went to that October 10th meeting. And I'm all for that. I want to eliminate systemic homelessness. Nothing is going to happen on this subject. We're going to have this discussion a year from now, 10 years from now, if I'm still around. Nothing is going to happen on this until services are mandated. Oh, Mr. Gitlin, oh, Supervisor, you can't do that. Why is that? Well, we have the Constitution. So you're saying to me we can watch our communities sink into an abyss. It's abominable and vile, and we just have to sit back and hold on to this Constitution and hope for the greater good to emerge? I don't think so. I think there are outlets in which people can be compelled. We compel people to drive a certain speed limit. That's a law. Well, hey, the Constitution, I want to do this and I want to do that. Well, you know what? Cities, counties, states have rights, and we can do that, and we can govern behavior.
Okay.
Hey, go ahead, Jamie.
You have woken the beast.
Good. I wasn't sure if you were sleeping or not.
Yeah, right. Well, as I may have mentioned before, laws are only good as your ability to enforce them. That is simple common sense. If you want to take a look at it, let's take a look at Public Law 414. Islam is banned in the United States of America as of 1952. This is a law, and there are mosques dotting our landscape. Why? Because the law is not being enforced. Now, at the root of this goes all the way back to childhood of almost any child born. They are born of parents. Parents instill before school and the indoctrination by the state rules and language of value. This is done in terms of showing the child not to touch the hot burner because he will be burned, and if he rebels and does it anyway, then he experiences the learning curve. And the learning curve and laws are very much the same. A lot of people will say a law is only wrong, or a law is only important when you get caught. So we're not talking about personal responsibility anymore. We're talking about, can I get away with it?
Well, Jamie, we're all familiar with laws that are worthless. I mean, they're on the
Exactly.
books. They've never been enforced. But I think what we have here is we do have the laws. It's about being gun shy. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal comes out. People aren't sure how to interpret it immediately, and they're gun shy about enforcing the camping laws. Isn't that kind of what we're at?
Well, in the reason that we are not a democracy, because 51% can be wrong. The reason we are a republic is because laws, and the reason we have a Supreme Court is because laws are open to interpretation. If I go 90 miles an hour in a 65 mile an hour zone, and it's dry and it's clear, and I haven't hurt anybody, it's only wrong unless somebody catches me doing it, or unless I get in an accident, and then it's on me and my fault. And that can be proven by forensics and, investigation to prove that I was violating the speed law. But there has to be some conscious willful understanding of what's right and wrong. I mean, you can go into gray areas, and there are plenty of gray areas, but many of the gray areas that have come and gone are no longer gray. We have determined that they are black or they are white. And if we have determined, it's like all the reasons that we have a Supreme Court, they come up and they say, okay, this whole concept of precedent, if somebody's done it before, then we know that going forward, if they do it again in the same manner and fashion, it's against the law. We don't have to keep rehashing over and over and over the same problem simply because people aren't listening or they aren't enforcing the law that is already on the books.
Well, sure, but going to the immediate problem, we have straight parks that restrict areas. You got some rocks falling, boom, they rope it off. You cannot go there. It's a violation of law. Safety issue. That's the whole thing, is a safety issue. They can, any government can restrict any area based on safety issues, right? Well, we have a tsunami zone.
Roger just told me that the government is us.
Yeah, but yeah.
Let me respond. First of all, Jamie and Wes and Joan, laws are meant to protect people. That's why we have them. Jamie brings up 90 miles an hour. If it's not hurting anybody, what's the big deal? You actually can exceed the speed limit in the state of Montana. You can go 150 miles an hour if you want, but you can't do that in California. Now, California looks at it, and these are our duly elected representatives, which represent us, says, well, if you're driving more than the speed limit here, we think you could get yourself into trouble. You could hurt somebody or yourself. So we're going to restrict that. And if you violate those laws, and here's the word, folks, you will have consequences. And the consequences are dear enough, whether it's money or worse, are dear enough to you to say, I'm not going to break that law again. We don't have that right now, everybody. There is no consequence for violating the law, this particular homelessness law, or this foul behavior as a result of this, because you can do pretty much whatever you want to do, including assaulting people, spitting on people, what have you. And no biggie. You won't have any consequences. Oh, I hear it. I hear the comments coming. What are you going to do? They have no money. What are you going to do? You're just going to clog up the jail system. It's precisely my point, is that we've allowed this to devolve into a situation where right now the amount of homeless people who are offending, just like the amount of people who come across our border looking for a better way of life, and so many of them are then exhibiting unlawful behavior, doing other things, murders and driving under the influence of alcohol and hurting people. Remember, laws are supposed to protect people. But there's so many of them, Roger, you can't put them all in jail. No, you can't put them all in jail. So I blame our representatives for not coming to terms with who they represent and doing something about it, showing some courage. Let me give you an example, and I'd like to hear Jamie's feedback on this. This one particular counselor, she indicated, well, this is Miss Kime, and she said, we have to listen to the Federal Court of Appeals. We have to do it. It's Washington, D.C. So I said, why are we then ignoring federal laws against recreational marijuana, which is against the law? Why are we picking and choosing? Why do we have federal law says you can't have sanctuary state? Why are we picking and choosing? Well, I like this one, I'll follow it. I don't like this law, and I don't like that law. Folks, that's not how it works. Laws are meant to be obeyed. And if you disobey these laws, you have consequences. And right now, we live in a society where there is no consequence for pretty much doing anything. You can pretty much commit all kinds of crimes, murder, kill out, have life sentences, and you know you're not going to have a life sentence. If you murder somebody, even so it says life, you'll be out in a few years. 8 years maybe, for even the most serious of crimes. Well, why is that? We just don't have the room in the prisons, Roger. So I look around and I say, well, why do you make a mockery of saying we have all these rules and these consequences and they're never effectuated? I'll go back to Jamie and let him respond to that, because we don't have any consequences. These folks are making their life choices, and I appreciate some of them have vices, alcohol and drug, and also infliction of mental illness. They don't have free will. But what are their consequences for this aberrant behavior? There are none. So therefore, it's not rocket science. They're going to continue to do them. So Jamie, I'm going to refer to you. Am I off base on this?
Sure. One of the red flags that comes up in my head when you start talking about the consequences is ruling by fear. Right now, people are afraid to do anything because they're afraid of the consequences. Political correctness is a good example. And everybody's saying, well, I don't want to be politically correct because what happens when I'm offended? Nothing. You are entitled to be as offended as you wish, and there are no consequences to being offended. This is important. Why do we have safe spaces? Because people get offended. There is a misevaluation of a situation based on a prescribed illusion, if I will, of what is the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do. This goes into political bias, and I don't want to go down that road because it's way too complicated, but it is exactly where it comes from. It comes from the difference between what's right and wrong, what's right and left. It's the reason this country is divided. Why can't we just get along? Why don't we live in harmony? I'm sorry, my words are falling on deaf ears. Nobody wants to live in harmony because this guy won't trim his hedge, and I want him to trim his hedge. We are diametrically opposed. We can't come to an agreement because we won't talk to each other. It's the old Hatfields and McCoys, the burying of the hatchet on the hill. You have to go to war, and somebody has to win and lose, and then somebody has to make the decision of who's right and wrong and say, excuse me, by what perspective do you make that judgment?
Well, those are good philosophies, but to get down to the nuts and bolts, what do we have?
We have homelessness.
Okay, we have, take the person. He's homeless. He has a tent. He camps. He sets up camp in Front Street Park. It is illegal. What do? You're talking about responsibility. You're talking about what you can do, penal code, whatever, ordinances. But there's another factor here. The city police have the legal right to move that person, and under a standard of reasonableness, if there's somewhere else that person can go, and I'm not saying 10 miles away, or anything unreasonable, if there's another public property where that person can go, then it's reasonable to move that person from the park where it's illegal to camp. So that's one of the things that's been really being overlooked.
It's a good argument. It's a good argument. I would only say that if we had a shelter, which I am in support of, and that's where people like Mike Thornton and I actually have consensus, then that person who is needing rest and sleep, I'm going to keep coming back to that human need for rest and sleep, should be escorted over to the shelter. Now, it's not a choice. Well, I don't want to go there. I don't want to do this. Then you may not stay here. As long as we have an alternative to give someone rest and sleep with a hot shower and a hot meal and all of the amenities that reasonable people would expect, then that person is compelled, just like driving 65 miles an hour. Don't go over it. You cannot do this. If you do, we're going to cite you. Now, therein lies the political correctness Jamie was just referring to. It's a law, but it's not enforced. It has no teeth. We don't have any money. What can you do? that's why these services delivered to this frail population, and I do have great compassion for it, you have to have a component of tough love in there. We're doing what's best for you. And I'm going to say this, and everybody probably remembers, or maybe you don't remember, when this whole issue of systemic homelessness really began. It's within all of our lifetimes here. Well, maybe not you younger people, but let me just remember there was once, I got into an argument with a millennial about a few weeks ago, and I was talking about Governor Reagan. He said, "What do you mean Governor Reagan? He was president." I said, "No, before that he was governor." "No, he was not." And he says, "I'm sorry you didn't learn this in your K through 12 education, but Governor Ronald Reagan was governor from 1966 to 1974. Well, he just looked at me with this blank look on his face, and he didn't know that. He just thought he was, well, he didn't wake up and one morning become president. He actually went through a process. And before that, he was president of the Screen Actors Guild. Most people don't know anything in their history. They're not taught anything in school. So here is Governor Reagan in his, I believe at the end of his first term or the beginning of his second term. I'll have to get the exact date on there. Between 1969 and 1971, right in that area. He had already served toward the end of his term, and I remember him being compelled to close down the state mental hospitals. Okay, now there was a Supreme Court case. No one really talks about who compelled him, and it was a Supreme Court case that you cannot keep people locked up in mental institutions. That's the short of it. And he says these folks are going to go home and be taken care of by their families. Now, that lasted about 10 minutes. And there were 8 state hospitals: Metropolitan State, Patton State, Mendocino State. There were 8 of them. I don't have all of them right in my mind. And they were just shuttered immediately, closed down. And these folks went out to their families. That's the first generation of homeless. And from there, that was what, 50 years ago, 1970? So here we are, 50 years later, half a century later, have the families taken care of their... No, they can't. They're ill-equipped to. But we have a much bigger problem than we had with systemic homelessness than existed in 1970. And no one addresses that. So maybe the extension of that answer is... Hold on, Jamie, I'm winding this up. Maybe this is the answer to this question is maybe we should consider opening up state mental hospitals again for those people who have affliction and get them some help, get them a warm place to sleep, get them hot meals, get them treatment. Maybe that's what we should consider, and the Supreme Court should revisit that. Go ahead, Jamie.
Proposition 63, 15 years ago it was passed. It's accumulated tons of money that's not being used. And it's for strictly for managing shelters for the mentally ill homeless.
It's housing. It's housing needs for the mentally illness. It's got a wide term.
I understand it's for managing, not constructing.
Okay. What?
All right. So, what are we doing to even determine which ones among the homeless are mentally ill? And what about Proposition 2 that was just on the ballot?
Stay on one first.
Okay, all right.
Stay on Prop 63, because we move across all of a sudden,
Prop
people
2
don't remember what you just talked about.
is related to Prop
But
63.
I understand.
Okay.
So we have this discussion, and Del Norte County has $416,000 of unspent money that it sits on for the better part of 2 decades, right? 15 years. You're exactly right, Joan. Now, we've discussed this. Put it to work. Help these people. It's a one-time money. It's not that much money to do this, but you can't do that. So they sit there, and the powers that operate in this in our jurisdiction have determined they're going to contribute this money to the state law, No Place Like Home, or the state law, which will then, it's not in effect yet, and essentially it kicks the ball down the road, and for yet another, how many more years, we will not be spending our share of the money giving people help. Now, this is a bugaboo with me, Joan. And I am upset that we sit on money. What was $415,000 15 years ago? Well, it's certainly a lot more than what $415,000 is in 2019. We know that. And the inflation will eat this up, and it's silly that we don't spend the money.
What happened with Proposition 2 in this election? It was supposed to be a legislative fix.
You know,
Did it pass or not?
Proposition 2. I can't put this in my mind. The election results. I don't know what specific. Remind me what 2 is again, because I've gone through so many things. In this election, I was more concerned with our measures C and B than I was with some of these state propositions, which are though important.
Proposition 2 would allow the state to issue $2 billion bonds for permanent supportive housing for chronically homeless with mental illness.
Okay, I believe that passed.
Okay.
Yes,
the
it passed.
bonds would be repaid over the years using
more borrowing.
Approximately 7% of the county's unspent reserves. Okay, so you say that passed.
Yeah, yes.
How do we get...
Okay, I can't answer. Joan, you're asking someone in my position as a county supervisor.
Well, let's
to ask,
find
how
out.
do we do this or how do we do that?
How do,
I need to say this. This is really important because Joan asks these hard questions and wonders why we don't have response. Our Board of Supervisors would rather not deal with many issues. Now, shocking, I know, but they don't respond to say, we're going to take this position and do this with this money. Our Department of Health and Human Services doesn't get to the point where that $416,000 was spent for a period of 15 years. I mean, you can study something to death, but you don't have any action on it. It's more, and I'm mouthing my words, more words.
who do we talk to?
Okay. You talk to folks like me, and you come to our Board of Supervisors, and you talk to our Board of Supervisors, and you raise your voices. You talk to our state senator, Mike McGuire. You talk to our state assembly member, Jim Wood, who incidentally both were invited, and for reasons that are their own, Assembly Member Wood didn't respond to me in my invitation. And in respect to Mike McGuire, he did and had another commitment. And I asked them not to send surrogates. I asked them to be there for this important meeting. But, Joan, the reality is this. You may not want to hear this answer, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. We're a small county at the end of their districts. We really don't have much political clout with McGuire and or Wood because we're not Mendocino, we're not Sonoma, and we're not Marin County. We're not even Humboldt County. We're tiny little 12,000 voters strong Del Norte County. And you can raise your voice all you want, but until you get their attention, and sometimes they need to be replaced, you're not going to have a voice. You're just going to be said, yes, we'll look into it, and then nothing happens. That's reality of political reality. Now, I've certainly brought this to the attention of my electors. They don't care for me very much, and I don't take it personally.
I vote for you, Roger. I do.
They don't care for me very much, and I really don't care. I'm not at this point to win a popularity contest. I'm here to really implement some change. And I'm going to use Sam Straight's words as he walked out the door. He says, Roger, I really appreciate what you're doing, but nothing's ever going to change here. And he's not wrong. But I sure as hell am not going to sit here and let my community fall into an abyss where life will now become unlivable. I've been down to the Bay Area. You guys have seen what's going on. You saw what's on the city of Portland, what's going on up there. I posted on my Facebook today. The mayor wants out. He can't take it anymore. He wishes his 2 years were gone because he can't control it. And of course, he's one who believes in the touchy-feely part of it. Mandate services, but they don't. They want to reason with people. Jamie, I know you want something to say. I'll shut up.
Okay, thank you. 3 or 4 minutes, okay. Moving right along. Speaking of things that people don't want to hear about, I'm going to make a very small list. But we can start with the Federal Reserve. We can go to the Trilateral Commission. We can go to the, what you call here, the Agenda 21, which has now been renamed to something, Agenda 51 or 41 or something. We can also talk about the Council on Foreign Relations, and we also can throw in the state of Jefferson. Why not? All of these entities. First of all, you're never going to see a government. Ever, ever, ever. You'll never see a government. You won't see a company. You won't see a corporation. These are all abstract concepts. What you will see are the people that man them. Those people are the same people that live next door to you, the people that you see at the supermarket, the people that you see in hospitals. You may even see some of these people being homeless. They're just people. However, there is a common denominator in this country. Primarily, it's money. If you have a lot of money, you don't care what anyone else says. And the more money you have, the more deaf you become. We talk about economies of scale. In a county like Del Norte County, one of the most impoverished, poorest counties in the state, up against Malibu, which unfortunately is really in bad straits. We feel sorry for those folks, but the fact that the San Diego people, the people in San Francisco, Thousand Oaks, wherever the case is, where they're having a booming economy, Silicon Valley, there's a lot of money, middle class thrives, it's healthy. The nation, the economy of the nation is thriving, supposedly. But I'm still paying $3.50 for a cup of coffee when I used to pay a dime. I'm saying, no, the economy is not doing well. It's doing good for some people, but it's not universally good for everyone. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want something better, you have the mechanism. It's called capitalism. Get a job, make more money. You can afford this stuff. But there's something missing. I went through Economics 101 and 102, macro and microeconomics, and I know that devaluation of the currency is a bad thing, economically speaking. But if you keep following the ladder going up, it's going to make things tough for everyone, always. It's never going to get better. If you want to go back, if you want to go to a point where you are sustainable, to use one of those clicky left-hand words, then you're going to have to make things easier. And by easier, it means more accessible, more equal. Not to get into Joan's socialism thing here, but you're going to have to make the playing field level for the people that need the help. Give them a hand up, not a hand out.
Roger?
Well, I'm just going to respond. I appreciate Jamie's global view of all the problems we have, and certainly have lots of problems in this world, in this country. I'm going to stick to just this one right now, Wes, which is systemic homelessness and the collateral behavior, which is why I'm sitting here today. And that's what I'm going to focus on, one problem at a time. And I will not accept the premise that there's nothing that can be done. I can't tell you the number of naysayers who say, Roger, you're never going to, there's no law north of the Klamath. This is Del Norte County. I've heard that ad nauseum. What I will tell you is that we can do something about this, because I don't want to see our community end up like Berkeley, where tents are on every off-ramp. They're all over the Bay Area. Every off-ramp you have these tent cities in the squalid conditions. Or Portland. It's coming here. It's probably already here. Sacramento, Stockton, all of our cities are just loaded with these awful conditions, which we have permitted.
Well,
okay, let me go, and then I'll shut up. Okay, now, we're talking about here in Del Norte County. Mm-hmm. Can we do something about it? Can we fund a homeless shelter in Del Norte County? That's a simple yes or no, and the answer is yes.
No, Roger, I don't want you to go without talking about the airport loan. Most people don't understand it.
Because I'm going to talk about it right now.
Okay. Let me just interrupt. This is KFUG, KFUG 101.1 on your FM dial.
Okay, now, Wes just mentioned the airport loan. In September, October of 2016, I think it was September, it was before the November election, our Board of Supervisors, on a 4-to-1 vote, I was on that board, I voted no, voted to loan itself through the Border Coast Regional Airport Authority, called BICRA, the down payment of $2.9 million from a $5 million economic fund that we inherited years and years ago when the feds took away our timber industry and our fishing industry. We got $5 million, and it's been sitting there for the better part of 2 decades, waiting for an economic decision. So our board voted 4-1. Well, Supervisor Gitlin, why wouldn't you vote to put a down payment on a brand new airport? Number one, I didn't think we needed it. I think we could have remodeled our existing terminal, but the government was paying 90% of it. That's the Federal Aviation, FAA. So we voted, and it was a 4-1 vote, to build a $20 million terminal for essentially one airline, which we have. Now, why did you vote against it? I would have voted for it if they would have just donated the money and forgiven the loan. But because of the mindset of the majority of the board members, at that time 4 of them, I can name them who they all are. 2 of them are sitting on our Board of Supervisors today, Howard and Hemmingson. They voted for this. They are expecting the county and the Border Coast Airport Authority, which cannot pay this loan back because it only has one flight a day going in, one out. It won't have the emplanements necessary to pay back this loan. So we're going to pay ourselves back $96,000 a year for the next 40 years. Translation, that's 480 months. So that money, $96,000 a year, to replenish the $2.9 million we loaned ourselves instead of just forgiving the loan and having the same terminal and putting that to work in $2057. So we'll have $5 million in the year 2057. How silly is that? What's $5 million in 2057? Well, I will tell you, it's going to be a lot less than it is in 2019 or 2016 when we pass this. And the mindset to wait to have this fund replenished at $5 million makes no sense to me. I tried to make this clear to my colleagues on the board, and of course, you know, a lot of personal animus comes in. You know, we like Gitlin, and he's pushy, and he does this, and sometimes he steps on his toes. And yes, Jamie, sometimes I talk too much, which is all the time.
Don't stop.
Okay.
Don't stop.
All right. Mea culpa, my faults. But what am I saying? What am I saying? Take that $96,000 we're paying ourselves back and put it to work in 2018 and 2019. Let's make ourselves a decent shelter or give raises to our abysmally paid county employees. Do something with that money for the next 40 years. $96,000 in our $25 million general fund will go a long way. Instead of saying, let's kick the ball down the road. Now, I seem to be the only voice saying that. I've spoken to a number of people, and I brought this to their attention, and I get crickets. Okay, Wes, you said it yourself. I need to know more about this. Well, you do. Jamie, you need to know more about it? I'll tell you. We are paying ourselves back $96,000 a year for 480 months. That money it's going to ourselves. It's not being distributed to provide services to our very needy constituents, including those who are frail, mentally ill, drug addicted, alcohol addicted, and who plethora our shoreline with tents. It's not going to help them. So let's get this done. Let's find ways to help people. Now, if you can get through this, I like Gitlin, I don't like Gitlin. It doesn't matter whether you like me or not. Do I make sense to you, folks? Do I make sense to you? Am I saying something that it's galvanizing with you? Jamie, am I making sense?
I'm glad you brought it up. I'm going to go back to one of the first things you said when we started out today. And Wes was congratulating you on being here, and you said this is your presence here was going to be the first of many. I have occasionally, from the time of Councilman Bob Berkowitz started his town hall meetings at Fisherman's Restaurant.
Supervisor Berkowitz,
Yeah, excuse me.
Mhm.
I looked upon it as a positive step because I had a direct line. He wasn't even my supervisor. And I said, I have a direct line to government. And Roger started attending, and I says, now we're talking. This is my guy. Well, that's only because I'm in his district.
No.
And I'll just leave that where it is. But I said, you know, in the beginning, I joined the Tea Party 10 years ago because I just came in from the Bay Area 30 years. I know the Bay Area. I know the changes that have gone there, and it's deplorable. It's just, don't get me started. Moving right along, I looked at the Tea Party as one of the most prominent things in Del Norte County, and I thought it was one of the healthiest things that could possibly happen. Not necessarily because of their views, which I divorced myself a couple years later, but because the people were getting together and they were hashing out their problems. And I will say it till I leave this area or I die, which one or the other is going to happen. But the reason that this county is what it is because they don't get together and air out their issues. I have been to the city council meetings. I've been to the board of supervisor meetings. I have participated in the chamber mixers. I have seen the amount of participation in this community in and of itself, for itself. And the largest congregation I've ever seen has been at the fairgrounds to watch a bunch of horses and cars run into each other. I'm sorry, but I don't want to trash or bite the hand that feeds me. I love this community. But I really wish they would get together and start talking to each other and not about each other. You know, this one does that. You know, this division that keeps us apart. I would really like to have serious, regular town hall meetings, nonpartisan. Don't get the right and the left in, because the reason that I didn't vote for Trump or Hillary is because I recognize the left wing and the right wing belong to the same bird, and it's the system that's broken. When I say system, I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about our culture. Our culture is in deep need of repair. I'm not going to go down the religious thing and say we should be following the holy book. I am going to say that we need a serious dose of common sense and some direction from people that understand the problems and are willing to step up to the plate and offer solutions. There's my 2 cents.
Oh, I can't agree more. Just getting dialogue open, getting town hall meetings going. Look at how many people came out. They all wanted to hear what was going on. They all wanted to see, you know, and hear for hopeful solutions. I mean, that's where it happens. I mean, at least that's where it starts. So.
Well, it should happen in our city council and our board of supervisors chambers, but it doesn't. We have a chairman here who's none too quick to cut one's microphone if he doesn't like what you're saying or how you're saying it. Mm-hmm. And that's a reality. I'm not going to mince my words here anymore. Now, we don't have government that functions on behalf of the masses. We have government that has self-serving interests. And let me. What are you talking about, Supervisor Gitlin? I'm looking at the triplicate newspaper, and I see this ridiculous trip to Washington, D.C. Howard and Cowan rubbing elbows with President Trump. I'm holding back laughing. I'm holding back laughing. What good did it do to the people who live in this county that they got a free trip to Washington, D.C. to rub elbows with the president, or to go to Japan, or some other nonsense?
Did they offer why they went, or what they wanted to accomplish?
So we need to be heard. Our voice needs to be heard. It's the same old rhetoric. I will tell you this, folks. I'm going to go back to Washington, D.C. in 2019, but I'm not going to do it on your bucks. I'll go down there. I'll fly myself back, and I'll put myself in a hotel, and I will do everything I can to speak on behalf to the people that matter, including I'm going to ask for an audience with the president. I'm going to ask it as part of a group, because I was his county chairman in getting him elected way before he was president. And I'm very proud of my association. I'm not sure that our current Board of Supervisors, anyone even supports Trump, because they revile him all the time, and they take the Kool-Aid. I supported Trump, and I will vote for him again in 2020 when he runs again. And I'm very proud of my support for Donald John Trump. Now, when we go back to Washington, it will not be on public money. I will not go back there and say, "Oh, whoopee, we got to hear this, we got to hear that." Thanks, folks, for sending me to Washington for nothing. And you bet I'm angry, because that money could have gone to someone's raise, or it could have gone to a homeless shelter. We should be doing business in our county. We don't need to be going back to Washington, D.C. for these ridiculous trips and what have you. I know there are people who will disagree with me, but that's my point on it.
Well,
I think we're just about out of time. Back to this homeless problem in the park.
Yep.
True North is proposing that this causes sanitation problems.
True.
The way to solve it is to put in more porta potties for the people that are camping in the park.
Respectfully disagree.
Right.
First of all, they need permits to do that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
The money issue is almost not even of interest. Hold on one second. I know you're going to give me something.
You can take that with you.
Joan, you're establishing permanency in a situation which isn't permanent. Remember, to rest and sleep. Now, and I mentioned this on my Facebook, within 50 yards of both of those locations are not one but two restrooms operated by the city, already paid for. They just have to have it manned. We don't need those, and I'm not besmirching the porta potty people. We don't need a spate of these facilities around there which need to be maintained. And quite frankly, and speaking to the folks who run this, they're a little concerned their property's going to be damaged by the same irresponsible people who litter and don't behave properly.
Well,
I don't see that as an answer.
In the park, my husband's a retired doctor. He said there is a sanitation problem, but if you want to put porta potties, put it back where the people are camping, not the park.
You've got
where the people are.
There are
the homeless
permanent restroom facilities within 50 yards of where there's one in the Battery Point parking lot. There's a restroom there, and there's one near the Marine Mammal Center. That's within walking distance. They could actually put their tents over there, frankly, and be right next to the restroom, and then the city would agree to keep them open during hours that they're not keeping them open. They usually lock them up at 7 o'clock at night.
That was another complaint, that they should stay up until 10 or something.
Okay, everybody says, well, sure, do this, do that. The reality is there's beds over at Our Daily Bed Ministry, which has a restroom. Why are these people staying in cold conditions? It's going to rain soon. What are we doing?
I think we're out of time.
Yeah, we're just about out of time. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today.
Good conversation. See everybody at the next town hall.
This is 101.1 on your FM dial, KFUG.